The champagne tasted like ash in my mouth. It was a vintage Dom Perignon, the kind my new brother-in-law Mark prattled on about, equating its price tag with its quality. He was a man who understood the cost of everything and the value of nothing. A perfect match for my sister, Chloe. I watched them from across the ballroom of the St. Regis, a gilded cage dripping with floral arrangements I'd paid for. Chloe was a vision in white, her laughter a tinkling, practiced sound that never quite reached her eyes. She was the sun around which my family orbited, and I, her older sister, was a distant, utilitarian planet, useful for my gravitational pull, my money, but rarely acknowledged for my light. I'd funded a third of this opulent spectacle, a gift that felt more like an invoice. My parents had made it clear it was the least I could do. Chloe deserves the best. Alara, my mother had said, her voice laced with that familiar saccharine disappointment she reserved just for me. You have so much, it's only fair you share it. Sharing, in my family, was a one-way street, flowing from my bank account into their lives. I was 34, the founder of a successful cybersecurity firm, a self-made woman in a world that hadn't handed me a thing. My penthouse, a 3,000 square foot sanctuary of glass and steel overlooking the city, was a testament to sleepless nights, relentless ambition, and sacrifices they couldn't begin to comprehend. To them, it was just another asset on my ledger, another resource to be tapped. The evening wore on, a blur of forced smiles and vapid conversations. I felt a familiar tap on my shoulder. It was my father, his face a carefully constructed mask of paternal warmth. Alara, darling, your mother and I need a word with you. In the library, his tone was light, but his grip on my arm was firm, proprietary. A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. These private chats were never good. They were the staging grounds for ambushes, where emotional blackmail was served like an aperitif. The library was paneled in dark mahogany, smelling of old leather and new secrets. My mother, Catherine, was already there, perched on the edge of a Chesterfield sofa, her posture rigid. The door clicked shut behind us, muffling the festive din of the wedding reception and amplifying the tense silence in the room. Well, my mother began, dispensing with pleasantries. Now that all the excitement is settling down, we have the most wonderful idea, a final wedding gift for Chloe and Mark. She smiled, a predatory flash of white teeth, something truly meaningful. My father stood beside her, his arms crossed, a silent enforcer. I waited, the knot in my stomach tightening into a cold, hard stone. They're so in love, Catherine continued, her voice dripping with manufactured sentiment, and they need a proper place to start their life together. A real home, not some little starter apartment. I already knew where this was going. The audacity of it was breathtaking, yet entirely predictable. We think, she said, her eyes locking onto mine, that you should give them your penthouse. The words hung in the air, obscene and absurd. I stared at her, then at my father, searching for a flicker of jest, a hint that this was some grotesque, miscalculated joke. I found none. They were serious, utterly, terrifyingly serious. A laugh escaped my lips, a dry, humorless sound. You want me to give them my home? Don't be so dramatic, Alara, my father interjected, his voice a low growl. It's a starter home for them. You can easily find another place. You have the means. The means I built, I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. The means I earned while you were funding Chloe's influencer lifestyle and Mark was finding himself on a yacht in the Mediterranean. That's enough, my mother snapped, her mask of civility slipping. This isn't about you, Alara. For once in your life, can you think about your sister, about this family? You owe us. You owe her. We supported your ambitions. You supported nothing. The words erupted from me, a torrent of long-suppressed resentment. You tolerated my ambitions because once they paid off, I became useful. I am a bank to you, not a daughter. I looked at them, truly looked at them, and saw, not parents, but strangers with familiar faces. Their eyes were cold, calculating. They weren't asking. They were demanding. They saw my home, my sanctuary, the physical embodiment of my life's work, as a trinket to be handed over to the golden child. The answer is no, I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. It is unequivocally, absolutely no. The discussion is over. I turned to leave, my heart pounding against my ribs. I felt a hand grab my arm, spinning me around. It was my mother. Her face was contorted with a fury I had never seen up close. You selfish, ungrateful little girl, she hissed, her voice venomous. "After everything we've done for you, everything we've sacrificed." And then it happened. Her hand flew through the air, the crack echoing in the silent room like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side, a bright, searing pain exploding on my cheek. The shock was a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. My own mother had just struck me. In the stunned silence that followed, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. My father didn't move, his expression unreadable, complicit. The door creaked open, and Chloe and Mark stood there. Chloe in her pristine white gown, a hopeful, expectant look on her face. "Is it done?" she asked, her voice light and airy. "Did you tell her?" She saw my face, the red mark blooming on my cheek, my look of utter devastation. Her expectant smile didn't falter, it widened. In that moment, I understood everything. This wasn't a spontaneous, greedy idea. This was a plan, a coordinated, cold-blooded assault on my life, orchestrated by the three people who were supposed to love me most. The sting on my cheek was nothing compared to the profound, soul-deep agony of that betrayal. I stared at their faces, my mother's righteous fury, my father's cold indifference, my sister's grasping entitlement. The background noise of the party, the laughter, the music, felt like it was coming from another universe. I was utterly alone. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the library, past my beaming sister and her new husband, through the opulent ballroom filled with strangers. I didn't stop until I was outside, the cold night air a balm on my burning skin. The shock was a physical presence, a heavy shroud, but beneath it, something else was stirring. A cold, hard ember of rage was beginning to glow in the desolate ruin of my heart. They had slapped me. They had tried to take my home. They had revealed themselves for what they truly were. And in the silent cab ride back to the penthouse they so coveted, I made a vow. They wanted something from me, and I was going to give it to them. Not my home, not my money, my revenge. The silence of my penthouse was deafening. Hours ago, it had been my sanctuary, a symbol of my success. Now, it felt like a fortress under siege. The sweeping city lights, usually a source of comfort and inspiration, seemed to mock me, illuminating a life that had just been fractured. My cheek throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, a physical reminder of the evening's horror. But that pain was a whisper compared to the inferno of rage and betrayal roaring inside me. I paced the polished concrete floors, my bare feet cold against the smooth surface, the silk of my bridesmaid dress rustling with each agitated step. Every corner of this place was mine. I'd chosen the art, designed the custom shelving, agonized over the exact shade of gray for the walls. The thought of Chloe and Mark living here, lounging on my sofa, sleeping in my bed, their unearned privilege seeping into the very fabric of the place I had built from nothing, it was a violation that made my stomach churn with a violent, acidic fury. My phone, discarded on the marble island, began to buzz, a relentless, pulsating vibration that grated on my raw nerves. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Finally, I snatched it up. The screen was a constellation of missed calls and notifications, texts from my mother, my father, Chloe, a group chat they had ominously titled Family Matters. I opened the first message from my mother. "Ilara, your behavior tonight was appalling. You embarrassed this entire family. You need to apologize to your sister immediately and do the right thing. We are waiting." The sheer, unmitigated gall of it stole my breath. Apologize for being assaulted, for refusing to hand over my home like a party favor. The injustice of it was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I scrolled through the other messages, each one a fresh twist of the knife. From my father: "Your mother is distraught. I've never seen her so upset. You've broken her heart with your selfishness." From Chloe: "You ruined my wedding night. I can't believe you would do this to me. Mark is so disappointed. We had plans for the house. You're being so cruel." Plans for the house. My house. They had already decorated it in their minds, moved their lives into my space, confident in their ability to manipulate and bully me into submission. The anger I felt was no longer just a hot flash of emotion. It was crystallizing into something colder, harder, and infinitely more dangerous. It was the righteous fury of a lifetime of slights, 1,000 paper cuts that had finally culminated in a gaping wound. I sank onto a bar stool, the city lights blurring through a haze of unshed tears. My mind replayed a highlight reel of my life as the family ATM, the reliable, invisible daughter. I remembered being 17, my academic scholarship award ceremony. My parents hadn't come. Chloe had a dance recital that same night, a minor performance in a community hall, but it was Chloe's night, so mine was forfeit. I remembered my college graduation. They were there, but their attention was on Chloe, who had dramatically broken up with her boyfriend that morning and needed constant consoling. I remembered bailing my father out of a minor business miscalculation to the tune of $50,000. Money I had earmarked for a down payment on my first apartment. "It's just money, Elara," he'd said, patting my hand condescendingly. "Family is what's important." But family was always a code word for Chloe's needs, my parents' desires. I was the infrastructure, the plumbing and electricity that made the house run, taken for granted and ignored until something was needed. Chloe was the art on the walls, admired and adored. The buzzing of my phone started again. This time, a voicemail icon appeared. My mother's number. Against my better judgment, I pressed play. Her voice, thick with performative tears, filled the silent room. "Elara, I don't know what's happened to you. That girl I raised, my sweet, generous girl, she's gone. You've become so hard, so cold. Your father and we're just worried. This penthouse, it's too much for you. All that space, all alone. It's not healthy. Chloe and Mark would fill it with life, with love, maybe grandchildren. Don't you want to be an aunt? Don't you want to see your sister happy? Please, darling, don't let this apartment, destroy our family." It was a masterclass in psychological warfare, the gaslighting, the infantilization, the feigned concern for my well-being, all wrapped in a suffocating blanket of familial obligation. She was painting me as a lonely, pathetic spinster rattling around in a house too big for her, a house that could be put to better use by a real family. She was trying to make me doubt my own reality, my own success, my own sanity. For a fleeting moment, the old conditioning kicked in, the deeply ingrained instinct to placate, to smooth things over, to take the blame just to make the conflict stop. But the memory of her hand striking my face, the sharp, ugly sound of it, acted as an anchor. It held me fast in my rage. That slap had severed something. The cord of guilt and obligation she had wrapped around me for 34 years had finally been cut. This wasn't just about the penthouse anymore. It was about the systemic, generational abuse I had endured. The financial exploitation was a symptom of a deeper sickness, their belief that I existed to serve their needs, that my life and my accomplishments were not my own, but were assets belonging to the collective they called family. Thought about the $50,000 from my father's miscalculation. I thought about the thousands I'd funneled into Chloe's failed business ventures, a jewelry line, a lifestyle blog, a bespoke candle company. I thought about the down payment I'd given them for their new car, the family vacations I'd subsidized. The numbers started to swim in my head. Where had it all gone? My father's business was a small, unassuming consultancy. My mother didn't work. They lived well, far better than his income should have allowed. Their desperation for the penthouse felt disproportionate. It wasn't just greed. It felt like fear. A switch flipped in my brain. The emotional, wounded daughter receded, and the CEO, the strategist, the problem solver, took her place. I had spent my career identifying threats, analyzing patterns, and neutralizing them. And my family, I realized with a chilling clarity, was the biggest security threat I had ever faced. I walked into my home office, the nerve center of my empire, and sat down at my desk. The anger was still there, a white-hot core of energy. But now, it had a purpose. It was fuel. I would not be their victim. I would not be their scapegoat. And I would not, under any circumstances, let them win. The injustice was a suffocating shroud, but I would not let it choke me. I would wear it as armor. I opened my laptop, the screen illuminating my face in the dark room. My fingers flew across the keyboard, opening encrypted files, old financial statements, bank records, emails. It was time to do what I did best. It was time to run a full diagnostic on the security breach that was my family. I was going to find out what they were so afraid of, and I was going to use it to burn their whole rotten world to the ground. The next 3 weeks were a descent into a digital rabbit hole, fueled by caffeine and a cold, simmering rage. My penthouse transformed from a home into a forensic lab. Whiteboards covered my gallery walls, filled with flowcharts and stacks of printed bank statements replaced art books on my coffee table. I slept in 2-hour increments, waking with a jolt from nightmares, where the sound of my mother's slap was a recurring thunderclap. The emotional onslaught from my family was relentless. They had escalated their campaign from guilt-tripping texts to a full-blown smear campaign among our extended family. I was mentally unstable, consumed by greed, a heartless daughter who had cast out her loving family. I ignored it all, letting the calls go to voicemail, the emails to an unread folder. Their noise was a distraction from the signal I was searching for. I was a digital archaeologist, sifting through the ruins of my financial past, and I knew there was something buried here, something rotten. It started with the $50,000 bailout for my father's business 10 years ago. I pulled up the old wire transfer confirmation. It went to Sterling Consulting LLC, my father's company, but when I cross-referenced it with his business filings from that year, I found something odd. Sterling Consulting LLC had been dissolved 3 months prior to my transfer. He had me send money to a defunct entity. Where did it actually go? I kept digging, line by line, transaction by transaction. A pattern began to emerge, faint at first, then undeniable. Small, irregular payments made from a joint account I'd shared with my parents in college. An account I'd long thought dormant and empty. A credit card opened in my name that I had no memory of applying for, with a balance that was consistently paid down by microtransactions from an unknown source. It was sophisticated, it was insidious, and it was far beyond the capabilities of my technologically inept father. This was calculated, deliberate fraud. But I was hitting a wall. I had the smoke, but I couldn't find the fire. The trails would go cold, vanishing into shell corporations or accounts that were closed years ago. I was an expert in my field, but corporate cybersecurity was different from personal forensic accounting. I needed a specialist. I needed a ghost. My lawyer, a sharp, pragmatic woman who had handled my company's incorporation, recommended someone. "He's the best, Ilara," she'd said over the phone. "But he's particular, Julian Croft. He finds things people don't want found." Julian Croft's office was a small, unassuming suite in a nondescript building downtown, a deliberate choice for a man who valued discretion. He was younger than I expected, perhaps my age, with kind, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through the corporate armor I wore. He didn't say much as I laid out my story, my voice clinical and detached as I detailed the wedding, the slap, the financial anomalies. I pushed the hard drive across his polished oak desk. "It's all in there," I said. "Everything I have, bank records, emails, text messages. I think my parents have been stealing from me for years. I need to know how much. I need to know how." He nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the hard drive. "This isn't just about money, is it, Miss Vance?" His voice was calm, empathetic. It disarmed me. The dam of my composure, so carefully constructed over the past few weeks, began to crack. "No," I whispered, the word catching in my throat. "It's not. I'll call you when I have something," he said. A week later, he called. "Can you come to my office? I think you need to see this." The hope that flared in my chest was so fierce it was almost painful. When I arrived, Julian had a single file folder on his desk. He opened it, revealing a single document. It was a trust statement. "Your maternal grandfather, Edward Harlow, passed away when you were 20, correct?" Julian asked. "Yes," I said, confused. "He left Chloe and me a small inheritance, $10,000 each, I think. My parents managed it for us since we were in college." Julian slid the statement across the desk. "According to this, he left you a trust fund valued at $2 million to be managed by your parents until your 30th birthday, at which point control would be transferred to you. You turned 34 this year." I stared at the paper, the numbers swimming before my eyes. $2 million, a life-altering sum of money that I never knew existed. I don't understand. This can't be right." "Oh, it's right," Julian said, his voice grim. "He set it up with a small, private bank in Delaware, very discreet. He stipulated in the trust deed that you were not to be informed of its existence until your 30th birthday. He probably wanted you to make your own way without the safety net, to build your own character. Your parents were legally obligated to inform you and turn over control 4 years ago." The room felt like it was shrinking, the air growing thin. My parents hadn't just stolen from my earnings, they had stolen my grandfather's legacy. They had stolen a future he had planned for me. "Where is it?" I asked, my voice a strangled whisper. "Where is the money?" Julian turned his laptop towards me. On the screen was a complex web of transactions, a spiderweb of deceit. "They started siphoning it out almost immediately," he explained, his finger tracing lines on the screen. "Small amounts at first, then larger. They used it to pay off credit cards, including the one they opened in your name. They used it to fund your father's business trips, to buy my mother's jewelry, To pay for Chloe's life, they funneled it through a series of shell companies, one of which, I discovered, is registered to your new brother-in-law Mark. The pieces clicked into place with sickening precision. His sudden interest in Chloe, their whirlwind romance, his lavish lifestyle that seemed to have no visible means of support. He wasn't just a freeloader. He was a co-conspirator. Over 14 years, they've drained almost all of it, Julian continued. There's less than 50,000 left. The final withdrawal, a big one, was made 2 months ago. My guess is a bad investment went south. Probably one of Mark's. They're broke, Ilara, and they're deep in debt. That's why they needed the penthouse. It wasn't just a wedding gift. It was a lifeline. Their last, desperate attempt to liquidate your biggest asset to cover their tracks and fund their lifestyle. I leaned back in my chair, the leather cool against my skin. The shock was immense, a tidal wave that threatened to pull me under. But as the water receded, something else remained on the shore. It was clarity. A cold, hard, beautiful clarity. The years of feeling less than, of being the unfavored child, of wondering why my best was never good enough. It all made sense now. It wasn't about love or affection. It was a business decision. They had to keep me feeling insecure, guilty, and perpetually obligated. Because the moment I felt truly powerful, the moment I stood up for myself, their entire house of cards would collapse. The slap wasn't just an act of maternal anger. It was the desperate act of a cornered embezzler. I looked at Julian, at the evidence laid out before me, and the last vestiges of grief and victimhood were burned away by a clean, pure flame of purpose. The hope that had flickered within me was now a raging fire. I was no longer a victim, stumbling through the dark. I was a woman who had just been handed a map, a weapon, and a target. They stole my past, I said, my voice low and steady, resonating with a newfound power. Now I'm going to take their future. Julian met my gaze and gave a single, slow nod. What's our first move? The days that followed were a masterclass in controlled fury. My grief had been transmuted into a powerful, focused energy. My penthouse, once a crime scene of emotional trauma, was now officially a war room. Julian Croft, my forensic accountant, became my de facto general, and we quickly brought in the final member of our triumvirate, Anya Sharma, the sharpest litigator my corporate lawyer knew. Anya was a force of nature, a woman who radiated an intimidating intelligence and a palpable disdain for injustice. When I laid out the story for her in Julian's office, her dark eyes flashed with a prosecutor's zeal. She didn't offer condolences. She offered a battle plan. This is more than a civil suit, Ilara, she said, her voice crisp and precise. This is wire fraud, bank fraud, aggravated identity theft, and conspiracy. We have enough to put your parents and your brother-in-law in prison for a very long time. The word prison hung in the air. Part of me, the deeply conditioned daughter, flinched. But the woman who had been slapped and systematically robbed for 15 years held her ground. I don't want them in prison, I stated, my voice firm. The two of them looked at me, surprised. Not yet, anyway. A prison sentence lets them off too easy. They become martyrs, victims of their cold-hearted daughter. They get to abdicate responsibility. I want them to pay it back. All of it. I want them to understand the consequences of their actions in a way that bars on a window could never teach them. I want to dismantle the life they built with my money, piece by piece, until nothing is left. Anya's lips curved into a thin, appreciative smile. A scorched earth policy. I like it. So, we leveraged the criminal charges for a civil settlement from hell. We'll need irrefutable, airtight proof. Julian, who had been quietly observing, slid a new file across the table. I've been tracking the final large withdrawal from the trust. They moved $200,000 through 3 shell companies, ending in an account for a real estate developer in the Cayman Islands. They put a down payment on a beachfront condo, a little retirement nest egg they bought with the last of your inheritance. The sheer audacity was staggering. They were planning their escape, ready to leave a trail of financial ruin behind them, while they sipped cocktails on a beach bought with my grandfather's legacy. The tension is that they don't know we know, Anya explained, leaning forward, her focus intense. Right now, they think this is a family squabble. They're still trying to manipulate you emotionally. We need to keep it that way. The moment they suspect you have a forensic accountant and a lawyer, they'll start hiding assets and destroying evidence. And so, the delicate high-stakes game began. I had to re-engage with my family, but as a new version of myself, one who was seemingly weakening, crumbling under the pressure. It was the hardest acting job of my life. I started by answering a call from Chloe, she said, her voice a mix of petulance and relief. You're finally picking up. Mom and Dad are worried sick. I've just needed some time to think, I replied, pitching my voice to sound weary and confused. I could almost hear her preen through the phone. Well, I hope you've thought about how much you hurt everyone. My wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I let the silence hang, a carefully calibrated pause. I know, I said softly. Maybe we can talk, all of us. I need to understand. We agreed to meet for dinner in 2 days. It was the opening move, the bait. Behind the scenes, our operation moved at lightning speed. Julian, with the help of a private investigator Anya recommended, began a deep dive into Mark's finances. We discovered he was little more than a con artist, with a history of failed ventures and a mountain of personal debt. He had married Chloe for access to what he thought was a wealthy family, only to find out the wealth was a carefully curated illusion, funded by a stolen trust. He was a rat in a trap, and he'd just gotten the door slammed shut behind him. Anya drafted the settlement agreement. It was a brutal document. It demanded repayment of the full $2 million, plus interest, adjusted for inflation a sum closer to $3.5 million. It required the immediate liquidation of all their assets, their house, their cars, my mother's jewelry, my father's art collection. It stipulated a wage garnishment for the rest of their natural lives, and, most critically, it included a full, detailed confession of their crimes, signed and notarized. This confession was our leverage. If they breached the payment plan in any way, it would be delivered directly to the district attorney's office. The night before the family dinner, the tension in my penthouse was thick enough to taste. Anya and Julian were with me, running through the final strategy. They're going to expect you to be emotional, Anya coached. They will use your history against you. They will call you selfish, crazy, ungrateful. You cannot react. You are a gray rock. Your only goal is to get them to the real meeting, the one they don't know is coming. The real meeting was Anya's We weren't going to confront them at a quiet dinner. We were going to confront them on their own turf, at the apex of their social claiming lives, the annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala, an event my mother had been chairing for the past 5 years. It was their command performance of wealth and respectability, and we were going to bring the whole theater crashing down around them. The plan was set. I would go to the dinner and play the part of the broken daughter. I would tell them I was reconsidering, that I wanted to find a solution. I would suggest we all meet the following night, at the gala, to present a united family front and finalize our reconciliation. It felt like walking into a lion's den, armed with nothing but a flimsy script. The next evening, I sat in a private room at a restaurant my father favored, the air thick with unspoken accusations. They looked at me, their faces a mixture of smug satisfaction and impatience. They thought they had won. We're glad you've come to your senses, Alara, my father said, taking a sip of his wine. We knew you'd do the right thing eventually. I took a deep breath, picturing Anya's face, her voice in my ear. Gray rock. I'm not saying I'll give you the penthouse, I said, my voice carefully neutral, but I'm willing to discuss a compromise. I think it's important we put on a united front. Mom, your gala is tomorrow night. It's a big deal for you. I think we should all be there, together. Show everyone we're still a family. And then, we can sign an agreement. My mother's eyes lit up. An agreement. She thought I meant the deed to my penthouse, and the chance to parade her reunited family in front of her society friends was too tempting to resist. What a wonderful idea, she beamed. A perfect plan. They left the dinner convinced of their victory, their condescending pats on my shoulder a final insult. I watched them go, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. The trap was set, the tension was unbearable, a high-wire act with no safety net. But for the first time in my life, I was the one in control. They were walking into the fire, and I was the one holding the match. The ballroom of the Grand Hyatt was a sea of glittering chandeliers and forced smiles. It was the epicenter of my parents' world, a stage upon which they performed their carefully constructed play of affluence and philanthropy. My mother, Catherine, was in her element, gliding through the crowd in a sapphire gown, her hand on my father's arm, accepting accolades for her work as the gala's chairwoman. Chloe and Mark stood nearby, a perfect, polished couple, already spending my penthouse in their heads. They had no idea they were the guests of honor at their own execution. I arrived late, a deliberate choice. I had spent hours with the stylist Anya had hired. My armor for the evening, a sleek, black Tom Ford gown that was both elegant and severe. When I walked in, heads turned. My presence was a surprise. After the rumored family rift, my appearance was a topic of gossip. My family saw me and their faces bloomed with triumphant relief. I was the prodigal daughter, returned to the fold, ready to sign away my life's work. My mother kissed the air by my cheek, her perfume cloying. "Ilara, darling, you look stunning. I'm so glad you've decided to be reasonable." I gave her a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I'm here to finalize our agreement, Mom. Just like I promised." I let them enjoy their victory for another hour. I watched them laugh, schmooze, and bask in the glow of their social standing. Every smile, every toast, was a lie built on a foundation of my stolen money. With every passing minute, my resolve hardened, my purpose sharpened. The catharsis was not going to be a loud, messy explosion. It was going to be a quiet, precise demolition. Anya and Julian arrived at precisely 9 o'clock, as planned. They were dressed for the occasion, blending in seamlessly with the legal and financial power brokers in the room. They gave me a subtle nod from across the ballroom. It was time. I approached my family, who were holding court near the silent auction tables. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice calm and low, "can we find a quiet place to sign the paperwork? I'd like to get it done." Beaming, my father led the way to a small, private salon just off the main ballroom, a room reserved for VIP donors. Chloe and Mark trailed behind us, their eyes gleaming with greed. The moment the door closed, the atmosphere shifted. Anya and Julian stepped into the room behind us, shutting the door with a soft, definitive click. My father's smile faltered. "Who are these people?" he demanded. "This is a private family matter." "They are my advisors," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "This is Julian Croft, a forensic accountant, and this is Anya Sharma, my legal counsel." The color drained from my mother's face. Mark's confident smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of panic. Chloe just looked confused. "What is this, Ilara?" my mother asked, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't answer. Instead, Anya stepped forward and placed a thick, leather-bound portfolio on the polished mahogany table. She opened it. "Catherine and George Vance," Anya began, her voice cutting through the tension like a surgeon's scalpel. "On behalf of our client Ilara Vance, we have prepared this document. It is a full confession and settlement agreement." She turned the portfolio for them to see. The first page was a summary of the $2 million trust my grandfather had left me. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her throat. My father stared, his face turning a pasty gray. "This document details 15 years of systematic fraud," Anya continued, her tone relentless. "It outlines the draining of the Harlow Trust, the creation of fraudulent credit accounts in our client's name, and the laundering of stolen funds through a series of shell corporations, one of which is registered to you, Mr. Collins." She fixed her gaze on Mark, who looked like he was about to be physically ill. Julian stepped forward, placing a second, even thicker binder on the table. "These are the supporting documents," he said quietly. "Every bank statement, every wire transfer, every forged signature, every email. We even have the paperwork for the condo you put a down payment on in the Caymans. It's all here." The silence in the room was absolute. My family was frozen, trapped in the harsh glare of the truth. The masks were gone. All that remained were the terrified, guilty faces of common thieves. What do you want?" my father stammered, his bravado utterly shattered. This was my moment. I stepped forward, my gaze sweeping over each of them. My mother, who had slapped me, my father, who had enabled her, my sister, who had cheered them on, my brother-in-law who had plotted with them. "What do I want?" I repeated, my voice a low, dangerous hum. "I want my grandfather's legacy back. I want every single cent you stole from me, with interest. I want you to sell this life you've built on lies. The house, the cars, the jewelry, the article of it will be liquidated." I looked directly at my mother. "You will step down as chair of this gala, effective immediately. Your name will be a disgrace in this town. You will work, for the first time in your life, to pay me back." I turned to Chloe and Mark. "Your honeymoon is cancelled. Your future is cancelled. The life you thought you were getting is gone. You will have nothing, because you are nothing." Chloe finally broke, a sob tearing from her throat. "Ilara, you can't do this to us. We're family." Family, the word was poison on my tongue. "You stopped being my family the moment you decided my life's work was your personal piggy bank. You stopped being my family when you demanded my home. And you," I said, my eyes locking with my mother's, "stopped being my mother when you raised your hand to me." I slid the final pages of the agreement across the table, along with a pen. This is your choice. You sign this full confession and repayment agreement, and you live out your days in quiet shame and obscurity, paying for your crimes, or you refuse, in which case, Ms. Sharma will make a phone call to 2 detectives from the DA's white-collar crime division, who are currently enjoying a coffee in the hotel lobby. They are very eager to see Mr. Croft's binder. The choice is yours. You have 5 minutes. Panic erupted. My mother began to weep hysterically. My father pleaded, his voice cracking. Chloe begged. I stood silent, unmoved. I was the rock they had always accused me of being, and their waves of empty apologies and desperate promises broke against me, powerless. Finally, with shaking hands, my father picked up the pen. He signed. Then he pushed it toward my mother. Her hand trembled so violently she could barely hold it, but she signed. Mark, sweating profusely, scribbled his name. They had chosen their fate. Anya gathered the signed documents, her expression grimly satisfied. We will be in touch tomorrow with a list of approved liquidators. Do not attempt to move or hide any assets. We are watching. She and Julian turned and left the room. I was alone with the wreckage of my family. The sounds of the party filtered in from the ballroom, a world away. They stared at me, their eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and defeat. There was no remorse, no apology, only the bitterness of being caught. I looked at them one last time, not with anger, not with pity, but with a profound and liberating indifference. Goodbye, I said, and I walked out the door, leaving them in the ruins of the life they had stolen. As I crossed the ballroom floor, heading for the exit, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. It was the feeling of a massive weight being lifted, the feeling of justice, the feeling of being finally and completely free. A year can be a lifetime. The person I am today, sitting in the sun-drenched corner of my penthouse, is not the same woman who staggered home from her sister's wedding. A stinging handprint on her cheek and a crater in her heart. That woman was a victim, a survivor, holding the shattered pieces of her life. The woman I am now is an architect, building a new existence on a foundation of self-worth and unbreakable boundaries. The aftermath of the gala was as swift and brutal as Anya had promised. The news of my parents' financial and social implosion ripped through their community. My mother's fall from grace was particularly spectacular. Forced to resign from all her charity boards, she became a pariah. They had to sell their home, the sprawling house I grew up in, filled with memories that were now tainted. I attended the estate sale, a silent observer in the back, watching strangers pick over the artifacts of my childhood. I felt no triumph, only a quiet, somber finality. They now live in a small rental apartment 2 hours out of the city. My father, stripped of his fraudulent consultancy, found work as a sales associate at a hardware store. My mother works as a receptionist at a dental clinic. A significant portion of their modest incomes is garnished and wired to a holding account managed by Anya's firm. They will be paying me back for the rest of their lives. It was never about the money, but the restitution is a constant, tangible reminder of the consequences of their actions. Chloe and Mark's marriage disintegrated within months, unable to withstand the harsh reality of no money and no prospects. Mark, exposed as a con artist with his own mountain of debt, vanished from her life as quickly as he had appeared. Chloe, for the first time in her pampered existence, had to get a job. She works in retail. We have not spoken since that night. I have no interest in a reconciliation built on anything other than genuine remorse. And from what I hear, through the family grapevine, there is none. There is only bitterness and blame. My healing was not a straight line. It was a messy, painful, and necessary process. I found a therapist, a brilliant woman named Dr. Iris, who helped me unpack 34 years of emotional manipulation and abuse. We worked through the grief of mourning the family I wished I had, rather than the one I was given. You didn't divorce your family, Elara, she told me in one session. You simply stopped participating in a dysfunctional system that required your subjugation to survive. Her words were a revelation. I wasn't the destroyer of my family. I was its sole survivor. I had escaped the wreckage. I sold the penthouse. As beautiful as it was haunted by the ghosts of the battle I had fought there. It was a fortress, and I no longer wanted to live in a fortress. I wanted a home. I bought a brownstone in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood, with a small garden in the back where I am learning to grow roses. It's a space that feels like a beginning, not an ending. The money recovered from my parents, from the trust my grandfather left me, felt sacred. It was blood money, in a way, paid for with years of my life and a legacy I never knew. I couldn't just absorb it into my own accounts. It had to mean something more. 6 months ago, I launched the Harlow Foundation, named for the grandfather whose faith in me reached across time. Our mission is to provide financial aid, legal support, and psychological counseling to victims of familial financial abuse, what experts call inheritance hijacking or elder financial exploitation, but which I know is simply theft, dressed up in a family photo. We help people like me, people who have been betrayed by those they should have been able to trust the most. Julian Croft sits on the board, and Anya Sharma's firm provides pro bono legal services. We have already helped dozens of people reclaim their lives and their futures. My work at my cybersecurity firm continues, but the foundation is my passion. It is the alchemy of turning my deepest pain into my greatest purpose. I sometimes get asked, by journalists or at foundation events, if I have any regrets, if I miss my family. It's a complex question. I miss the idea of them. I miss the concept of a mother's unconditional love, a father's protection, a sister's camaraderie, but I do not miss the reality of what I had. I do not miss the constant anxiety, the feeling of being a means to an end, the hollow ache of being unseen. I have learned that true family isn't about blood. It's about respect, trust, and mutual support. I have built a new family of my own making, close friends, trusted colleagues, the people at my foundation. A family that doesn't demand, but gives. A family that doesn't take, but shares. This entire story, this confessional, is not just my narrative of revenge. It's a testament to the power of saying no. It's a declaration that your life, your work, your worth, are your own. They are not resources to be plundered by anyone, not even the people who brought you into this world. The slap my mother gave me was meant to put me in my place, to remind me that I was small and they were powerful. But what it actually did was awaken me. It was a catalyst that forced me to see the truth that had been hiding in plain sight my entire life. They didn't break me that night, they freed me. And as I sit here now, in my own home, surrounded by the quiet hum of a life I built, a life I defended, and a life I reclaimed, I am finally, truly, at peace.